G'day. How are you going? Can you all make sense of my slightly weird Swedish Australian accent, first of all? Yeah? Cool. Just making sure this slightly weird analog signals getting picked up by some of the more analog and some of the more digital radio antenna in the room. Cool. If you're an introvert, just nod. Yeah? If you're an extrovert, please don't hold back. All right. Fantastic. All right, it is nearly cocktail hour, so I'm glad you made it back from the pool. Fantastic. All right, great to be here in lovely Puerto Rico, and I want to give, as a keynote speaker, just a little bit of a round of applause to someone who's had to do 8 mini keynotes throughout the last 2 days. Can we please just give a little bit of appreciation to Francisco? I know what it's like to do a keynote. Doing 8 mini keynotes, that's a lot of work. So great to be here and to decode the future with all of you. Now, by the way, I should just say that as a futurist, which basically means my mum has absolutely no idea what I actually do for a living. She calls me her son, the one who used to be a lawyer, who's now a glorified astrologer. There's no one like your family to tell you what you actually truly do for a living. Does anyone else struggle to explain what you actually do for work? Okay, fantastic. And you actually have honorable professions. So we'll talk about decoding the future and decoding what we actually do. Because increasingly, will you not just be selling to CIOs and CISOs and chief digital officers, you'll also be selling to humans who have no IT background whatsoever, which means that translating all the super cool technologies you're responsible for becomes even more of a case of good old school human storytelling and translation. But soon enough, you'll also be selling not just to humans, but to chief procurement officers who are AI agents. Who just wants to retire before you have to learn any of this new shit? All right. Now, if we just retire today, the robots can never ever steal our jobs, so it's a really good retirement strategy. Now, before we talk about the future, let me just explore as well for a moment. As a futurist, I like to claim that I'm a little bit of a humanist and, dare I say, a little bit of a traditionalist. So I also want to explore with you what the role of humans and entrepreneurs like yourselves is and are in an increasingly AI and tech-led future. Does that sound like a plan? Cool, because there's no plan B, so this is what we're going to go with. All right. Let me explore with you why on earth a futurist would also claim to be a little bit of a humanist and a traditionalist. So before we talk about some of these exponential technologies you've heard about for the last 2 days, I want to take you back onto a little bit of a historical journey, a little bit of a space odyssey, but back in history, back to my native city of Stockholm, Sweden, for a brief moment in time. To a time when things were a little easier, you might argue, a little slower. Things were either this or that. They were either black or white, not as grayscale as they seem to be today. Back in the 1910s in Stockholm, Sweden, amazingly back then in Stockholm, people only wore black or white clothing to keep it really simple. And this here was the urban vista that back in the day greeted a man by the name of Georg Johansson, or the son of Johan, or as we'd say in Australia, George Johansson, which sounds very sort of Viking-esque. This was the urban vista that greeted him back in 1910s as he moved from the family farm. As the second oldest son, he had few inheritance rights, and as a result, he had to make his own commercial future in Stockholm. And after completing a retail apprenticeship and gathering his venture capital, his life savings, in 1916, he decided to breathe life into his first bricks and mortar shop. His commercial opportunity was to dress the increasingly sophisticated Swedish gentlemen of the time. And this was, of course, a time before YouTube videos, YouTube shorts, TikTok dancing, or even selfie sticks, when looking into a camera was still very much of a technological novelty. And his business model was all about the bespoke in menswear. face-to-face, belly-to-belly sales, a personal handshake, and in a cap nod of approval to his family heritage, as he became a man of commerce, he decided to change his surname from Johansson to the man from the southern farm, or in Swedish, Georg Sörman. He's my great-grandfather, and as you can tell, he must have been a bit of a futurist because he's got a great haircut, a cool little pocket square, and we also share some genealogical traits with North Korean dictators. And he invested in the latest technology of that era, the neon sign that you just saw. But unfortunately, many, many years later, for my mother, Birgitta, who looks amazing for a 106-year-old, as you can tell, we moisturize in our family, and she still dresses me every day of the week. For her, the business environment in an era of digital disruption has fundamentally shifted underneath her feet. The rug's been pulled out underneath her feet, as you might say. Because today's customer, the end consumer, increasingly their rational, information-focused minds have become digitized. And you know this story. They'll walk into mum's quaint store. They'll spend time with mum. She'll tell them stories about the organic cotton and the family businesses around the world that she sources her goods from. And while the customer, the prospective customer, will listen to this and buy into some of the stories at least, at the same time, their rational information-focused minds, incentivized with a 5% discount from Amazon.com/fashion, easy to say if you're Swedish, will scan a few barcodes to contribute to their real-time comparative data cloud. Then they'll say, hey, we'll think about it, and you know they're not going to think about it. They then exit the store to the sound of a very, very lonely little bell, go around the corner, and order the item on MrPorter.com instead. My mum describes this new customer, empowered with new technologies, as a cyber terrorist. And I think you understand why. The way my mum runs her business in a very analog, physical manner, measuring her SKUs with a pen and paper like this. I know you don't have clients like this. That's her version of big data, by the way. The way she runs the business in a very analog fashion, in many ways, is perfectly prepared for a world that no longer exists. Now, can you imagine how annoying it must be to have a son who's a futurist and who meddles in family business affairs? Does anyone sell to intergenerational family businesses, or do you avoid those? Any intergenerational family businesses in the room? All right, fantastic. You know the intergenerational tension at play. A few years ago, I wrote a little love letter to my mum called Digilog, where I argue to my mum, I don't argue, I put forward a very rational case, that the future, even in an age of robots and digitization, of artificial intelligence, is not necessarily about throwing away the analog baby with the digital bathwater, but rather embracing the best of these two worlds at the same time, the analog with the digital, tradition and technology at the same time. Unfortunately, for me, my toughest pro bono client chose not to listen. This book has the ears of Fortune 500 companies and executives. In Australia, our second largest bank, the oldest bank, Westpac, credits the ideas in this book with them moving from number 4 in terms of retail banking customer satisfaction to number 1. Unfortunately, the person I wrote it for has not yet read the love letter. Does anyone sense a little bit of hesitation or intergenerational tension? Who just feels like you're part of a family therapy session so far? All right, send me the invoice afterwards. Thank you for your listening. All right, it's been profound. Okay. All right. During the pandemic, sadly, after 104 years in business, my parents had to file for bankruptcy. Sweden's oldest family-owned menswear store, the oldest menswear store at that, right? Family-owned menswear store is now a cafe. And my mum always points her finger at the pandemic, but we all know many retailers who were digitally prepared with technology, who'd chosen to digitally diversify their customer experience, their back end, their front end, who did incredibly well during the pandemic. The real reason was that she'd failed to modernize, failed to embrace new technologies, failed to tell her story, the 104 years of brand DNA, via the channels available to her, failed to invest in new ways of providing customer experience, customer satisfaction, even exchanges. You had to come into store, because my mum's version of this is that the best type of customer experience ever is always a smiling human interface. But if you're an 80-year-old and it's a cold day in Stockholm, ice on the streets, having to go into a store via public transport on icy streets, is that the best type of customer experience, even if there's a wonderful human at the other end? The answer is no. Thank you for your high levels of interactivity. Now, she is my toughest pro bono client. Luckily, there's a silver lining here, which is that she's a fantastic grandmother now to my 2 sons, Lucian and Aurelian, and we have a little bit less intergenerational tension during our family dinners. Now, I use this story, and this might not be your customer, but you probably have someone like my mum, as a CEO, as a chief digital, or CEO, or a chief human resources person, or CFO, who's against modernization, and it only talks about the risks of digitization and modernization. You might know some of them. Some of them might be in your family. But at the same time today, I want to talk about some of the things that we also, and some of the things I heard from Mum, which is how do we do this responsibly, right? How do we actually adopt some of these technologies in an ethical and responsible manner? Not just running head first without thinking about when things could go wrong. So while I've been sitting here for 2 days hearing about all the amazing technologies enabling the future, I feel like this is like the data center room of the future here today. I also want to address the notion of responsible AI today. Do I have your permission to do that? Because I actually think it's a unique selling proposition and lines up really, really well with TD SYNNEX's brand proposition as well. Some of the things I'll talk about here today will sound very much like science fiction. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from today, it's that science fiction is very, very quickly becoming science fact. Who remembers this fantastic movie, Ex Machina? All right. Now you all have permission as part of your continuous professional development points to also go and watch this movie on your flights home. Now, this movie is about the Turing test. You're all familiar with the Turing test, right? It's a blind test where, in a blind test, a human doesn't know whether he, she pronoun is interfacing with another human being or with a robot. The robot is so sophisticated that it can fool us into thinking we're interacting with another human being. Does this sound eerily familiar? The things you've been experiencing online or in your businesses recently? Yeah? All right, fantastic. Like deepfakes. Little cyber threat we all have to contend with right now. Now, when the people behind this movie thought, how are we going to launch this idea virus of this movie so that people actually want to go and see this dystopian vision of artificial intelligence actually breaking out of the box, developing some level of sentience potentially, and some of the cyber threats that might actually create, they thought, why don't we launch it at the coolest conference in town? The High Growth Summit in Puerto Rico. Yes, that's right. No, they launched at the second coolest conference in town, which is South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, and they did it on the most logical digital platform available to them at the time, on Tinder. Because they realized a large portion of the conference attendees will be geostrategically logging into their Tinder passports and setting the geostrategic location to Austin, Texas, hoping to go on a hot date later on that evening. And unbeknownst to the lovesick puppies in the audience, the people behind the movie had built a little Tinder profile based upon the looks of the Swedish actress Alicia Vikander without all the weird cyborg headgear. And because she's female, but also artificially intelligent, she was able to multitask and have a bunch of flirtatious conversations at the same time with hundreds of unknowing, lovesick puppies. Now, what do you need at any good marketing conversation towards the end? is a great call to action. Her call to action was, if you enjoy this really humanistic, flirtatious conversation, please go and check out some of my beautiful photos on my Instagram account. What do you think awaited them on her Instagram account? A little message saying, you've been hacked. Here's a promotion for a movie about the Turing test being passed and breaking out of the box. Case in point. Science fiction is very, very quickly becoming science fact. If we fast forward just a few years, OpenAI put ChatGPT to the test. Now, apparently the gold standard online to prove whether you're a human or a robot is the CAPTCHA test. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know about you, but I frequently fail the CAPTCHA test. Anybody else? All right. There's clearly a few more robots in the audience than I had thought, or at least cyborgs. This makes me a little bit nervous about the future of autonomous vehicles when, robots cannot see zebra crossings, but that's another matter. Okay. So OpenAI went like, hey, figure out the CAPTCHA test to prove to us that you're really good. ChatGPT thought about this and went, why don't I go onto taskrabbit.com and recruit a human being to do the CAPTCHA test on my behalf? That's right, we are now the workforce of the robots. Now, the human got a little bit suspicious and went, hey, why on earth would you want me to do the CAPTCHA test on your behalf? Are you a robot? Because the robot is so intelligent, it's now also learned how to gaslight and manipulate. So when, hey, in an age of diversity, equity, and inclusion, how dare you accuse me of being a robot? I'm vision impaired. The person on TaskRabbit collected the money and did the CAPTCHA test on the robot's behalf. Okay, science fiction is very quickly becoming science fact. But this, when it comes to agentic AI, is no longer just science fiction. In fact, there is a new Moore's law. No longer is it the case that computing power doubles every 18 to 24 months and coming down in a deflationary way in pricing. For agentic AI, and specifically for agentic coding, it's now doubling every 3 months. Every 3 months. And while your clients are sitting back skeptically, just waiting, hoping for their second mover advantage, their competition is 2xing them in the next quarter, 4xing in the next 2 quarters, in 1 year, 16xing them, and of course, in the next 2 years, it's 256xing the competition that sits back and doesn't do anything. This is scary, right? Now, this is no longer just science fiction, this is mathematics, right? And we have to enable our clients to adopt a new world that feels like science fiction, while some of it is actually just science or maths. Now, fast forward 2 years from that ChatGPT experiment, we now have Maltbook, a social network where humans are, yes, excluded. We can only be voyeurs while the AI agents are chatting to one another, making up new religions and new languages, and get nervous when humans start screenshotting their conversations, right? Or we go to rentahuman.ai, where AI agents hire what they call meat workers. Yes, that's us. Because apparently for last mile problems like mowing lawns and other things, they still need humans for a little while longer, right? Aren't you happy they wrapped up this conference with an inspirational speaker? Right. So this is what's now happening, right? The AI agents are here, and I think what we need to learn from this is that in the future, you won't just be selling to human beings. You'll also be selling to the AI agents representing your clients, who are, yes, optimized in a very rational way, just like the people that used to buy from Mum had their information-focused minds be digitized. Now AI agents will also brutally assess us on our efficiencies and your content And whether you're optimizing your newsletters, your LinkedIn articles, and all the content on your blogs, not just for humans, but also for the LLMs. Yes, now every blog needs an FAQ at the bottom because we're now training the LLMs on how to make smart decisions in your favor. And then we see news like this, just a few days old, right? Where the AI found a 27-year-old vulnerability no human had ever caught before, and which just forced an emergency meeting with every major Wall Street CEO by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Why? Because the new Claude Mythos model is so good that it found a vulnerability that no human in 27 years had found in OpenBSM. Exciting. Very exciting to be in this room, because what we need to learn from this is that the tool and the threat is the same technology. Like, this means you're like peddlers of both the potential threat and also the cyber architecture, including AI, to actually keep us all safe. Right? This should get you excited, not just fearful, by the way. But this is the point in history in which we now stand, on the dawn of what I think of as a creativity explosion, where yes, the human can actually do even more humane work, because the robot is helping us take the robot out of the human, so we can do less of the menial and the mundane and more of the meaningful and the humane. And I believe your essential role as tech partners is to help make it, or make IT, less scary. This is one of my 8-year-olds, like, movies he really wants to watch in the future, and I have no idea why. Should I be concerned? Give me parenting tips, please. So, how do we make it, or IT, or AI, less scary? The tools are all there at your disposal, and in terms of building your own, what I think of as your guardian thought leadership brand, so you stand out in a high-growth future and a profitable growth curve for your business, is that it's helping us turn a should into a could. Is anyone in the room, have you been told that you should be writing a newsletter? Or do more blogging? Or vlogging? More social media? More LinkedIn posts? Anyone? Who goes to bed guilt-free, having done all those things? Or do you go, I should be doing this? Yeah? Now, in an age where AI now speaks human, we can now just borrow prompts and be as good as Seth Godin, for example, marketing guru, in terms of building our customer lists, our newsletter lists, etc. Because anytime you speak, you can now record a conversation, turn it into a transcript, ask Claude or Perplexity or Gemini to turn that into a newsletter in your own voice, or a couple of LinkedIn articles. Right? Anytime you're recorded giving a presentation, turn those into little social media snippets on opusclip.ai. There's no excuses anymore to say that this is too difficult. We can all be Seth Godin when it comes to creating content and teaching the LLMs to find us all. Who likes excuses? Sadly, there's no excuses anymore. All right. So how do we turn this creatively into something we can all get excited about? Well, a little company out of the United Kingdom thought about, how do we actually use the AI to lower the risk of cyber threats, including scammers, right? A very sort of human Trojan horse. So let me just introduce you for a moment to AI grandma, Daisy, to see how this technology is being deployed in an ethical manner.
My friend, Daisy.
Hello, scammers. I'm your worst nightmare. I'm an AI created by O2 to waste phone scammers' time. So, W's then a dot.
3 times W and then dot.
I think your profession is bothering people, right?
I'm just trying to have a little chat.
It's nearly been an hour! For the love of...
Gosh, how time flies. It's showing me a picture of my cat, Fluffy.
It's showing you the picture of your cat, Fluffy.
Stop calling me dear, you stupid.
Got it, dear. Because while they're busy talking to me, they can't be scamming you. And let's face it, dear, I've got all the time in the world.
All right. So creatively, actually turning the AI and all its capacities to reduce the amount of scamming activity that we see in the world. So again, this is human creativity using the technology. My argument here today is that because the technology is now so good, it's helping us take the robot out of the human so we can do less of the menial and the mundane. Like, who loves punching spreadsheets? There's always a few people that do it really, really well. I hate doing it. Now, the technology helps me do less of that, so I actually have the mental energy to do more fun stuff, stuff that I should be doing in my business, right? The other thing we need to learn here is that your next customer might be as difficult when you're cold calling or trying to get through to a new customer as you might be speaking to AI Granny or the version in your industry. How will you actually connect with this AI agent? We might learn a few things in this world from ethical hackers, right? From Neo, now that we've actually all realized that we are all living in the Matrix. If nothing else, that's something I want you to take away from this conference. We are all part of the Matrix. Now, as important as ethical hacking is, that mindset of ethically hacking something before something goes wrong, I believe is also an entrepreneurial mindset we can take into our own businesses. So I want to introduce you to someone who's taken the ethical hacking mindset to think about how they can better serve their industry. Two New Zealand farmers recently came up with a way to virtualize fencing through IoT-enabled but AI-led solutions on the farm. And this is what that looks like.
Today we're here to discuss our new venture into virtual fence with Halter. Halter works by sending a series of signals to a collar that the cow wears. Provides feedback to your smartphone so you can see where those cows are on an app. You can draw in fences with the click of a button. You can move your cows into that part of your pasture and graze for as long as you wish. The halter collar is solar powered, and so it is really sealed. There's not a weak point for water to enter, and it worked. It's better for the animals, better for our bottom line, and better for our mental health.
Did anyone grow up on a farm or have farming agricultural clients? Yeah? Nobody. No, a couple. All right, there you go. They're the lights. All right. How much fun is fencing or fixing fences? Not very, my farming friends tell me. So could we have a solution like this instead? For anyone with teenage kids, would this be a good solution? Like, here's the ring fence where you can go out and not go out. And yeah, the collars are a bit weird. I won't go there. All right, forget what I just said. All right. All right, let me give you a few examples, though, when the technology can go wrong. And some of these are actually from my most preferred, my most beloved brands, when no human has been in the loop. And I'm going to argue that you and your clients need to be the humans in the loop to actually oversee how some of these amazing technologies get deployed, scaled, and implemented. A few years ago, Apple launched the super cool fintechy credit card, the Apple Card. And they thought, hey, let's just do away with all credit scoring. We don't need FICO scores because we've got artificial intelligence. And then in a big ceremony, they give one card to Steve Wozniak, one of the founders of Apple, and one to his wife. Now, unbeknownst to Apple, they share all their financial credentials equally. So it was amazing when Apple, in this big ceremony, gave a credit card where Steve Wozniak's credit limit was 10 times his wife's credit limit. Why? Because clearly women are more of a credit risk than men. Not in my family. I don't know about anyone out there in the audience. Because the AI was so backward looking, right? Trained on historical data. What do you think happened when Steve Wozniak and his wife took to X to complain about the inherent sexism in the AI? Massive product launch failure. Now, I was recently speaking, just last month, to 1,200 internal auditors in Vegas. of all places, in Sin City on ethical AI. Great setting. Now, they're all thinking very, very deeply about ethical, explainable, and responsible AI. And most likely, this is a brand pillar of TD SYNNEX's that sometimes we might forget about in our sales conversations. But make no mistake about it, internal auditors are looking at how responsible or irresponsible some of the technologies might actually play out in deployments. This is not to dampen our enthusiasm for the technology. It's just to make sure that we're doing it in a responsible way so we don't have to do the kind of post-mortems that they had to do at Apple. And we know, right, that our clients are now tinkering with these technologies, right? Adoption isn't the problem, but oftentimes translation is, right? We know from McKinsey that 88% are now using AI across America, but only 33% have scaled enterprise-wide when it comes to general AI adoption. When it comes to agentic AI, the next frontier, 62% are experimenting, but only 23% are scaling its production at the moment. I think the takeaways for all of you from here is to start having a conversation with our clients. It's not that you're behind on AI, but they might be behind on knowing what to actually do with it. The other insight here is that the problem isn't necessarily in the server room anymore. It's in the strategy room, which means that you should all have a seat at the table, or at least influence the people at the table, because these are all strategic decisions, and when they go wrong, you end up on the front pages of the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or your local newspaper. But the gap between the experiment and the deployment, I believe that is one of your opportunity pipelines moving forward. So explainable AI. Are you able to explain AI and where the files on the computer actually are? Are we able to give reasons to not just explain AI, to defend it, but also to sustain it when we sell it to our clients? That level of guardianship and trusted partnership with you guys is what your clients will increasingly be looking for, because they've heard about these stories when things go wrong. Let me give you one software example. Now, I won't mention the particular software company here. There was a job applicant, an African American, who suffered from several different disabilities, putting in hundreds of applications via a particular AI software. Got rejected often in seconds every time. In fact, one of the pieces of feedback he got as a deaf applicant was that he should go and take a listening course. Right? This is the level of what happens when humans are not in the loop. This has now become a class action. It hasn't played out fully yet, but what's happening here is not only is the case called his name versus software company, but the software company had to produce their entire customer list as well. Now, they sell to 61% of Fortune 500 companies. So those companies might potentially also have some liability from a discrimination perspective. 1.1 billion applications were rejected by the software. This means that us as vendors, as tech partners, also have to be aware, not scared, but aware of what can happen when there's no human in the loop overseeing these technologies. Right? This is not to scare us to not adopt the new technologies, but to do it in a mindful way and ask three really, really important questions. When it comes to selling AI and AI deployments, firstly, can we explain the technology? If we can't explain how the AI reached a conclusion, we cannot sell it with confidence. Right? We have to go beyond black boxes and know how the technology actually makes decisions. Secondly, can we defend it? If the technology you sold made tomorrow's front page or a federal courtroom, would you stand behind it? Again, work with your partners through the entire value chain to make sure that we upskill our awareness right? The AI destination programs and workshops that I've heard about sounds like a fascinating and phenomenal way to actually upskill ourselves and really know the technologies. And thirdly, can we sustain it? Will this technology still be right in 3 years? Is the human in the loop? And can we sustain the environmental footprint in a world where increasingly those internal auditors are not just looking at the technology and the ethics and the responsible governance behind it, but they're also going, what's the carbon footprint that these AI technologies come with? How much water does a data center drink? How much energy does it consume? Are you excited about your new role as the trusted guardians? Or a little scared, little aware, right? And that's totally fine as a human emotion at this point in time. But take these 3 questions with you. Now, as a futurist, I always prefer doing a pre-mortem as opposed to a post-mortem. Post-mortems suck. Who's ever done a post-mortem on a failed relationship? I know, guilty as charged, right? It's just too late, right? Okay? So I want to invite you into a little bit of a pre-mortem instead, because a pre-mortem enables us to actually shift course and do things slightly differently so we can affect a new future outcome. Ask yourself this in this little thought experiment. Go out to 2030 with me for a moment, and looking back towards now, ask yourself, in 2030, on your watch, your company went belly up. Uncomfortable, not fun as a thought experiment, right? What were the trends that you just missed? What were the future signals that you deliberately chose to ignore? And what were the investment decisions, either in yourself and your own awareness or tech stack, whatever it happens to be, that you just delayed and delayed that led to that demise? And instead, as a result of hanging out here at the High Growth Conference, what change will you make today to prevent that from happening? All the slides are available for you to download as well. If you want to print this one out on your next date night, feel free to bring it, or you can just bring it in to a conversation with your kids if they're not studying enough for school either. Right? Always good to do a pre-mortem as opposed to a post-mortem. Now, it used to be the case that the coolest coding language in town, I don't know, was Java or Python or whatever it happened to be. The good and the bad news now is that the coolest coding language in town is now Swedish Australian English. Right? Or Oklahoma English. If you can speak, you can talk AI. The AI now speaks human, right? Which is good and bad news, because some people use this technology for ill. Some people tinker with it. Some people just take prompts that they've seen on Instagram and directly inject them into their own internal systems with cybersecurity concerns as a result. But if the AI now speaks human, do you also translate technology in a humanistic fashion through great storytelling to your clients who might not be as trained in tech and IT as you are? Because this new breed of clients are now vibe coding their way into tech decisions. Like Dave Clark, for example. Now, if you haven't heard of Dave Clark, he was the CEO of Amazon for their e-commerce division, the most sophisticated and the most complex supply chain in the world. He's now left Amazon, started up his own company, Augur. Now, when he wanted to make a tech decision for his company, his new startup, he was like, I don't really find the right software vendor. It doesn't do exactly what I wanted to do. So I'm just going to block out some time this weekend, and I'm just going to vibe code it on Claude. I'm just going to vibe code it on Claude. Built a CRM system that he thought was better than any tech vendors. This is your new client as well, by the way, who go, why do I need your solution, right? When I can vibe code it on Perplexity or Claude, right? Again, not to scare you, but to make you aware of how we need to upscale ourselves to not only explain our technologies, maybe sometimes tailor them to our clients, but also build trust as the trusted guardians of these technologies. There's a new company out of China called Buy Wrong. For them, they don't sell licenses or seats, they only sell results. And if they don't deliver results for their clients, they don't get paid. Again, I'm not saying this to scare you, I'm saying it because increasingly we're moving from just selling tech stuff to results and outcomes for our clients. And we need to be able to communicate those to ensure that we still have premium value in the supply chain. Now, as Francisco alluded to a moment ago, I live in a semi-off-grid cabin in a national park in Sydney. It's water access only, and yes, it's where I'm preparing for the zombie apocalypse. First rule of prepping is never tell anyone you're a prepper. Okay. Now, I don't know about you and what hobbies you have. You probably have real hobbies. One of my hobbies is to chop wood. Goes with my Swedish territory. Unfortunately, I have bad technique, and I injured my back recently. And I had to go to see my amazing GP, my general practitioner, Dr. Erin Noonan. She's an amazing woman, very good doctor, very empathetic. And I went, hey, can you help me with my back? I had to explain what happened, etc. And she was like, hey, in this conversation, do you remember last time you were here for something else? She's like, I had to turn my back onto you to punch in, and I'm going to do this just for deliberate, illustration purposes. Turn my back, break eye contact, and then type in the electronic medical health records and the conversation. She goes, I've now got an AI medical scribe called Heidi Health, whose mission is to help doctors re-establish human eye contact with their patients to the point where it gets awkward. Yeah? She goes, did you know that in Australia, 80% of what gets said in a medical consult gets forgotten by the human patient? She goes, would you like a letter in Year 4 English explaining what actually happened, which is automatically generated on her behalf? It will also write a referral letter on her behalf to any specialist that I needed to go and see afterwards, like the radiologist. This saves her 2 to 3 hours of menial, boring shit. She goes, Anders, I didn't train for 12 years to become a glorified medical scribe. I want to see patients and help them improve their health and bounce forward. She goes, do you know how long my wait lines used to be before Heidi Health? She goes, I can see more patients now, and I go home earlier to see my family. She goes, on average, I also make more money every year because I'm no longer doing the paperwork, I'm seeing patients. Who's got like AI goosebumps now? Now, she's amazing. And then I go, I wonder how someone sold her this AI medical scribe. Do you think they talked about GPUs or terabytes or all the tech stuff that we love, that we love talking about? Now, someone probably goes, would you like to reestablish human eye contact? Would you like to make a human impact on more patients faster? Would you like to go home sooner? We've got a technology that's FDA approved, secure, all that will do it for us. Would you be interested? Yeah? She doesn't care about the GPUs or whatever the technology is in the background, like. And then the next level of this is when her AI agent starts speaking to my AI agent to manage all of our appointments on our behalfs moving forward. And this is what that might look like.
Hey, Anders. I am your friendly, all-knowing GP. I just got the report from your radiologist. Your cortisone spinal tap last week was successful, and the referral to your Medicare-funded physio appointments has been automatically generated. And we have taken the liberty of proactively booking your first appointment based on your shared Google Cal availability. We cross-checked your timings with your avatar. Payments will happen seamlessly in the background, so you don't need to worry about lodging any claims. We know a picture says 1,000 words and video says 1,000 images. So click on the link below to access your Radiology for Dummies report. I hope your recovery goes well and that you will be back to chopping wood at your cabin in no time, you Viking you.
Okay, now I've never said those words, which should make everyone feel very uneasy about deepfakes. But this is 2 minutes worth of recording my facial gestures and my tonality, and clearly not my American accent, on heygen.ai. Right? Could you use similar technologies for your sales calls? Yes, it might feel a little bit clunky, but we also have to remember that when it comes to AI, it will never be as shit ever again as it was today or yesterday, because it learns while we sleep. Could we use this on our blogs, in our sales decks, even in pre-qualifying conversations, to give a little bit of a snippet of our humanity? Again, it's helping us turn a should into a could. Now, the science fiction author Douglas Adams had something to say about our reactions towards and with some of these new technologies. He said that anything that's in the world when you're born is natural and normal and ordinary. It's just a natural part of the way the world works. Anything invented between the ages of 15 and 35 is new and exciting and revolutionary. You could probably get a career in it, like a TikTok analyst. Anything invented after the age of 35 is against the natural order of things. Does anyone feel a bit like this? Yeah, my mum always describes the digital world as digitally dehumanized, but I'll argue that it's actually more humane than we could ever imagine, even in a world where we're all becoming cyborgs. This is little Max Harpham. He's the son of one of my former colleagues, a good friend of mine, Emma Harpham. A really cool kid, loves his extreme sports, his skateboarding. And what's amazing about this is that he does all of these sports despite one of his disabilities. When he was born profoundly deaf. If a freight train went past him, or if he couldn't hear in an intersection, other cars, trucks, whatever, he would have no auditory signal of that event whatsoever. But because of a great Australian technology from Cochlear, which he has embedded into his skull, one behind each ear, there's now digital signal where there wasn't even analog noise before. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. This is what you guys are now sitting on in this room. Magic. And with great power and great powerful technology comes great responsibility at the same time. We are all cyborgs today. Now, I want you to just think about some of the menial and the mundane stuff in your workday that actually prevents you from doing the really meaningful and the humane. And this is a little exercise. We can start it here in the room, but by the way, all the slides are available for you to download via those little QR codes that you sometimes see popping up in the presentation. Yes, they are part of the work, because the work does not finish at the end of this keynote. And I want you to just think about what your average workday looks like. Just draw a little pie chart now, or if you prefer later on during the plane ride home. Just go, what does it look like? Where am I wasting my time? What are the time wasters? What am I spending too much time on? Right? Like Instagram doom scrolling, guilty as charged, or having too many coffees. There's never too many coffees. All right? And then start going, if I took one AI or tech deployment to take the robot out of the human, so just like Dr. Erin Noonan, I could do less of the menial and mundane and more of the meaningful and the humane, what might that look like? And go, in a future where humanity is actually enabled and augmented by technology, what do I want my workday to look like? If I'm selling these technologies to big organizations or small organizations, maybe non-for-profit, whatever it happens to be, how am I walking the talk of deploying these technologies? What do I want it to look like? How is it revolutionizing your own business? Just for a moment. A little piece of home play for you to do moving forward. I believe the fundamental mathematical formula here for a moment, for us humans to figure out our role in this AI-led future, is to start thinking about those fundamentally human aspects of ourselves. What our emotional quotient looks like, and training that every day, becoming 1% better every day, what your unique quotient looks like, your own thought leadership, your unique point of view on these technologies, but also sprinkling in a little bit of creativity, your creative quotient. And on top of that, digitally augmenting whatever you do every day, courtesy of artificial intelligence and other technologies, I believe create the most empathetic brands for the future. Brands that are optimized, yes, for humans, but also for the procurement agents that will be making decisions as well. At Moderna today, Tracy Franklin is the new Chief Digital and People Officer. Why? Because at Moderna, that you might recall from the pandemic, right? They have decided that because of agentic AI and artificial intelligence, IT and HR are no longer separate. Tracy Franklin has zero tech background. She now runs digital and people as one function. This is who you're now selling to. At McKinsey, they think of their workplace as partly made up out of humans, but 20,000 of their workplace, their headcount, are now AI agents. Some of those AI agents are making decisions either in your favor or against you, which means we need to optimize for that. Now, if you want some quick book tips from my little book club to take away and read, I would recommend these ones. Not all of them are hyping AI. Some of them are also talking about responsible governance, etc. So from more skeptical on the left, like Blood in the Machine, to a little bit more balanced, Nexus, and then Super Agency. If you just want to hype, only read Super Agency by Reid Hoffman, the LinkedIn founder. Great books. If you don't have time to read, just run them all through Claude and it will summarize it for you. Or you could listen to them on 1.5x instead if you're really, really attentive. All right. So the question is, what are we coming up against with human psychology here? At the University of California, at Berkeley a few years ago, they ran some really, really fascinating research where they asked the question, and this is probably pertinent for all your teams, if you had a great automation or innovation idea, and you believe the deployment of that idea would lead you to doing different work as a result, would you even share it in your company? Can anyone relate? 37% of people said, yeah, we'd probably share it. The rest would say, no, we'd sit on that if we had to do different work. And different means bad. Then they changed the question slightly and said, if you believe the deployment of your idea would lead you to doing better, more meaningful, more humane work, would you share it? Magically, 87% of people said, of course I would. In your culture, in your own companies, or even the companies that you serve, is the culture more like, yeah, different? Or is it more about, yeah, bring it on. Let's do it even better, more humanely, more meaningfully. And the way to get there is to start telling better stories. Now, humans don't like change. And to illustrate this point, let me bring you back to Sweden for a moment. In 1967, the Swedish government decided we were going to shift from left lane driving to right lane driving. Okay. You can see there was every ambulance chasing lawyers, Disneyland. The big change management mantra from the government was, just smile, we're all just new at this. Isn't that wonderfully liberating change management mantra? Just smile, we're all just new at this AI stuff, right? So let's compare and contrast that world of humans having to make a change to what it looks like for the robots. And imagine for a moment here sending your kids, your nieces, your nephews, maybe even your elderly grandparents in their wheelchairs confidently across this intersection. Now, according to the World Economic Forum, over the next decade, we'll be able to save 1.1 million, yes, human lives, courtesy of autonomous vehicles. When I recently returned from my most recent overseas holiday in Liguria, Italy, I personally welcome the day when humans are no longer behind the wheels, at least in Liguria, Italy. And when I share this in Mumbai, India, with one of our clients at Bharti Airtel. They said, Anders, this is nothing new. This is what it looks like in Mumbai every day of the week. Plus, we have semi-autonomous cows as well. Now, my mum always says, Anders, the world of digital is digitally dehumanized, but I would argue that, in fact, when we code for humanity, it can be more humane than we could ever imagine. This brings me to this point. Are you educating your clients on shifting them from what I call an AI fixed mindset to an AI growth mindset? Quick cap nod here to Carol Dweck's work at the University of Stanford School of Psychology for coming up with the initial idea of the growth mindset. Instead of asking ourselves and just going, hey, I'm just not good at this new stuff, this technology stuff, ask yourself, what are you missing? Instead of going, hey, I give up, it's all too hard, I'll use a different strategy. This idea of the growth mindset, I believe, should inform all your sales decisions, your marketing collateral, etc., all the stuff you're going to be posting on LinkedIn from a B2B perspective moving forward. Because your human point of view and your story truly matters. Because on top of all the AI, we now also have physical AI. Now, I just want to warn you here for a moment. If anyone has a problem with needles, look away in just a moment. But when you see news from Elon Musk around Optimus, for example, where his ambition is that the humanoid robot should be so good that it could thread a needle, this is already happening in China. In fact, they're using physical AI to now draw blood, which makes me hopeful that my next visit at the doctor's office with my sons, who are 8 and 4, might be a little simpler, and this is what it looks like. All right, who's freaked out? Next time you don't have to hold your loved one's hand anymore. You just get the robot to, do it for you and you can't move. All right, who feels trusting of the technology? All right. Now, these are my two beautiful boys, Lucien and Aurelian, and no, they're not wearing a wig. That is their real Viking hair. Now, I only speak Swedish with my sons. Yes, I'm one of those annoying people. And I've augmented my EQ, my UQ, and my CQ a little bit, though, with Duolingo, which I think they enjoy more than talking to their Swedish father in Swedish. But because of that, they now know things I haven't even taught them, like or, which are additional 3 letters in the alphabet with lots of dots over them. Now I hear the Duolingo OWL, which is an AI-first company, teaching them stuff I never knew how to do. For me, that is that mathematical formula of EQ, UQ, and CQ, plus some digital augmentation, actually creating something that's way better, and where they truly understand Swedish. They now know how to spell smorgasbord, which I know in American, you've dropped all the cool umlauts, but the real way we spell it is with lots of dots over the O's and stuff. They know how to spell that, not through predictive text, but because the OWL taught them how to do it. The OWL also picks up on little learning challenges. So it has a personalized learning journey for each one of them, depending on their skills, strengths, and weaknesses. Isn't this amazing? Recently, I went to Dr. Erin Noonan because I was a little bit concerned about Lucien. And I said, hey, I think he just has a little bit of anxiety. Him and his mother and I are going through a divorce, and I just want to provide the best care for him in this big moment in life, not just affecting us, but clearly our children. If you've been through it, you know what I'm talking about. And she goes, there's a 9-month wait list for human child psychologists in Australia, but while I give you a referral, let me prescribe you an app, a trusted app. She goes, what kind of stories is he into? And I go, well, I've introduced my kids in a very age-inappropriate fashion to Star Wars, very young, which might explain the pre-anxiety. And she goes, you need to download Headspace. a mindful technology, a mindfulness app. And she goes, I recommend you sit down every night when the boys stay with you. So now every night when the boys are with me in my cabin, we sit down and we do breath work with Yoda, which calms his nervous system and probably my nervous system as well, so we can get to the really good storytelling faster. This creates trust. The reason I talk about story, which is my final point of this presentation here today, is that story creates human trust. The best definition of trust I've ever come across is that trust is a confident relationship with the unknown. A confident relationship with the unknown. And what's the fastest bridge between the known and the unknown? Trust and storytelling. Storytelling explains how we get from here to there. In fact, strategy, which you're now part of, is a science fiction story with a deadline. Your role, I'm going to argue, is to explain new technologies and build a bridge with a story. Hopefully you've heard a few throughout today. Add your own stories when you're communicating to Tracy Franklin and others who are not IT trained on your technologies, so they develop a confident relationship with the unknown. Let me give you an example of what this might do for your businesses. Has anyone read the book Significant Objects or heard about this? A few anthropologists from America recently went, I wonder what premium stories can add to things. So they went out and they bought in thrift stores 100 different little trinkets, like little enamel figures and stuff that had very little value. They spent $124 on these objects, 100 of them. Then they hired 100 journalists and storytellers to write a little story about each of the objects before they then sold them on eBay for a 2,700% markup. I'll say that again. By telling a story about the technologies or the little things they were selling, $124 turned into thousands of dollars because they told a story. Like around this little, I don't know if it's a horse or just a confused something. All right? And they're like, oh, this little one was the little totem that a 12-year-old girl held on to when she was going to have to move from East Coast United States to West Coast. And she imagined that this totem was going to transfer her safely into her new home, where she knew no one. Like the stories were all made up, like the AI was hallucinating. 2,700% markup because of the stories. You guys are all science fiction storytellers today. What are the stories about your technologies that you're going to tell for your own markup? What are the stories about your own thought leadership that you can tell to command a premium? Yes, I know you've got some set pricing and maybe, volume discounts, etc. But start telling stories online, or what also is known as digital nutrition. Right? Because these technologies truly matter, right? As we think about the future, right? Even how tech offers a faster path to sustainability, a conversation that in the tech space sometimes gets forgotten. In fact, the combination of process automation, carbon data transparency, circular product or service design, and sustainable business models can reduce emissions by 45 to 70%. Is that a story that you're telling your clients? Right? At the same time, you also be mindfully aware that every ChatGPT query is pulling electricity through tons of copper across silver contacts, cooled by rare earth magnets, and every ChatGPT inquiry is the equivalent to a 500 milliliter bottle of water in terms of cooling. Also mindfully aware, right? These things all go together, and we need to be mindfully aware of those stories. So I want to leave you with a few questions. Why? Because futurists never leave you with 3 silver bullet points, because that would end your cognitive inquiry, but instead, we ask questions to get your creative wheels into motion. Ask yourself and your teams, how can you get 2x the result with half the effort? Through technology, yes, but also through human creativity. Which old analog processes don't offer you any actionable data insights whatsoever and need upgrading immediately? What's the compound effect of your competition adopting the right exponential technologies while you simply don't? And finally, what would our competition not want us to do next? One final story to get us into cocktails. The story is about a little brand that some of you might know called UPS. You particularly know them during Cyber Monday, for example. Now, a few years ago at a conference similar to this, somebody in the audience said, hey, I've looked at the data, and I can see that 22.5% of all vehicle accidents happen when we turn into oncoming traffic. Associated lawsuits, all the rest. Vehicles out of action. We're also burning lots of fossil fuels when we're just waiting for oncoming traffic to pass. What if we just stop turning left? Amazing, harebrained human idea, right? Then they were like, let's fit some GPS technology, RFID tags, sensors to our equipment to see whether there's any merit to this. There was merit to this harebrained idea, this heretical idea of no longer turning left. They now avoid the emissions equivalent to 20,000 passenger cars as a result and deliver 350,000 more packages because of that one human instinct and human creativity to do something different, to no longer turn left. They used to be ambiverts, now they only turn right. Yes, all wisdom in this presentation comes from Zoolander, clearly. All right, so what are you going to do next with all of this? You've sat and consumed an amazing amount of technological insights. I want to leave you with these final things. 3 ideas to steal and reuse with your clients. Firstly, remember the idea that sci-fi is now becoming science fact. Secondly, that adoption isn't the problem, but translation certainly is. And thirdly, to start story selling. Not just storytelling, but story selling. Use it to your advantage. 2 questions to track and crack in your organizations. Firstly, 1 question for your team. And that one is, what's the most boring part of your job? That answer should be your own internal roadmap. And secondly, ask yourself, are you selling AI to clients or actually using it yourself as a leader? And finally, on Monday morning, if you're still hungover on Friday, wait a little bit, although the competition might be 2xing you already, right? Open a blank doc and with 3 headers, write down time wasters, repeated decisions, and scale blockers. And fill out what are those in your company, right? That's your AI audit, and you can equally do it with your clients. I believe we are now fundamentally at the dawn of a second renaissance, ladies and gentlemen. A time when we combine the best of tradition and technology, the best of human intelligence and artificial intelligence, the best of robotics and humanity. In that world, start tapping both, but also start telling stories that are optimized not just for humans, but also for AI procurement officers of the future. Deploy the technology in a responsible fashion where you do less of the menial and the mundane, and increasingly more of the meaningful and the humane, in a way that sustains the technology, but also helps humanity solve some of the most wicked problems that we are now living through. Start preparing for that future today, because it's where you, your kids, and your grandkids are going to spend the rest of your lives. See you in that future. Thank you. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Anders. That was awesome. That was fantastic. I think we all have a ton to think about. Who loves AI grandma?